Alright, now we're talking. The Dolphins are open for business and Howie Roseman is making calls, while also shaking up the roster a little bit. The question is, which move are the Eagles going to make and how soon could it happen? In this video, I'll get you caught up on all the latest surrounding trade targets, who Philly has brought in for a visit, and the less than ideal offensive consultant that might get considered. Plus the latest on CJ Gardner-Johnson, why he probably won't be back, and Nakobe Dean being the answer on defense. So let's talk about that and everything else around the birds. But first, let's run it.
We got to pick up the nastiness, the violence, and the toughness of the group, and we got to get our swagger back. And I feel like I don't feel like I know it's gonna happen.
What's up, guys? Well, so far, the NFL season has gone just about exactly how we all expected. You know, with the Baltimore Ravens starting out 1-5 and not looking like a serious contender at all, the Indianapolis Colts leading the AFC at 5-1, Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Bucks leading the NFC at 5-1, while he has arguably become the frontrunner for MVP. Heck, that's also doing that without most of his supporting cast of starters. Plus, you got the New England Patriots, who are now leading the AFC East, thanks to the Bills dropping 2 straight primetime games where they were favored by 8.5 and 4.5.
Did that go the way you thought it was going to go? Nope.
Yeah, for all that's been made so far about the Eagles being not what we expected, the NFL this season is whack. Again, I've said this in the past, but it's like each week just reinforces the fact that this season, more than any other, the Lombardi Trophy is completely up for grabs. Because Philly isn't the only Super Bowl favorite or supposed good team dealing with coaching issues and play calling, with analyst Ryan Fowler bringing up the gripe for the Washington Commanders on the fact that they spent big money to beef up the line and improve the running game. Yet despite being up late against Chicago, aka the worst run defense in the league, the Commies decided against going jumbo. And yeah, made things completely predictable and ineffective by staying in pistol or the gun while running the good old inside zone.
You lose that battle. You lose that battle 9 times out of 10.
Fortunately for the Eagles, that resulted in a Commanders loss, but there's a whole lot of teams that are making things way more difficult than they need to be. Like, go back to the Bills for a second. You realize over the last 2 weeks, both Buffalo and Philly have gone 0-2 while averaging exactly 17 points per game and 5.7 yards per play.
It's too hard tonight on our quarterback, and it doesn't need to be that hard all the time where he's having to run out of the pocket. Their pressure, I thought at times we picked up the pressure, and then at other times the pocket was getting affected early. So the Russian coverage, as you know, we talk a lot about that, and it was disrupting our offense too early in the down.
Just saying, the argument applies to both teams, but the consensus, or at least the general consensus, seems to be, in Philly the sky is falling, and for Buffalo it's like, well, you know what, they'll figure it out. Of course, I get the argument for the Birds having players like A.J. Brown, Saquon Barkley, Devontae Smith, the O-line, yeah, all those weapons, and it's pretty wild to have that bad of an offense. However, the Eagles have had the second hardest schedule in the NFL up to this point and are at least 4-2. Whereas, for the record, the Bills' strength of schedule ranks dead last up to this point.
You sound like you're making excuses.
Maybe I am. And look, the Eagles can't afford to sit idly by. Now, the good news is that it doesn't sound like they will be, as ESPN's Jeremy Fowler shared recently that Howie Roseman is lurking in the trade market with primary focus on cornerback and or edge rusher. Remember, this is in addition to Mike Garafolo and Ian Rappaport sharing the same sentiment earlier in the week, so stay tuned because it feels like it's only a matter of time. Granted, that's on the defensive side, but it's really both of these here. I've talked about those on my last video, so go feel free to check it out. Although I would say keep an eye on this weekend's matchup between the Cleveland Browns and Miami Dolphins, since both teams enter at 1-5 and have been utterly atrocious. And look, considering where they're at, it makes sense that the feeling nationally is that whoever loses in this game will very realistically be looking at a cleaning of the house. If only there was a way for both of them to lose, quite honestly, because then you'd trade for the Browns and get Denzel Ward, and then the edge rusher, Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips. I don't know, maybe a tie is better? By the way, I don't know if I buy this, but Vic Fangio is apparently still believing in the current cornerback room.
Well, we've got to settle in and find somebody out there that we can rely on. And I think we have the guys that can do that. We just got to get them playing better.
I'll have more in the game preview video this weekend, but with Quinyon Mitchell in jeopardy of missing the game in Minnesota, Fangio is going to have to call a masterclass game on Sunday and maybe get a little bit lucky. Heck, you got Kelee, Ringo, and Adoree Jackson being tasked with shutting down Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. Sure, if anything, maybe it forces Howie's hand after having to watch 2 incompetent cornerbacks play on Sunday. Because while Fangio may have said it, I can't 100% believe he feels totally confident based on what he's seen on the field from both of those guys. Yet while we're here, let me ask you what I polled on a recent live stream. If you had to choose, what's the more concerning side? Are you more concerned right now by the offense for the Eagles or more concerned by the defense? I mean, think about it. You've got one side of the ball that clearly has the coaching but just lacks some players, whereas on offense, they've got all the talent in the world, yet sadly, it's being mismanaged in the most egregious ways possible. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Is it offense or is it defense? I will say that when it comes to the offense, especially depending on the Dolphins' outcome, the Eagles should have some intriguing options this weekend for an offensive consultant. However, there's a couple of those recent options that a lot of people would absolutely hate. But before I share that, there's one thing that I can promise you won't hate, and that's the sponsor of today's video, Transparent Labs. I've mentioned them over the past couple months, but I've really started to focus on taking better care of myself and consistently working out. However, like you guys know, when I first started doing that, it didn't take long before I plateaued and stopped getting the gains I was early on. But after some quick research, I realized that I wasn't getting anywhere close to the amount of protein I need. Which is why I've been excited to team up with Transparent Labs the past couple months, because their grass-fed whey protein isolate helps me to get my protein goals in a clean and healthy way. Now for me, the most important part is that it contains no artificial sweeteners, dyes, or fillers. Plus each serving consists of 28 grams of protein sourced exclusively from grass-fed cows. Also, one thing I found out through my research is using pure isolate allows your body to digest and absorb the protein easier. Of course, for those wondering, yes, this protein tastes great, it isn't chalky, and I haven't had any digestive issues. And the best part is the protein comes in 14 delicious natural flavors, so you can easily switch it up when you feel like having something different. So if you'd like to try Transparent Labs grass-fed protein, then head down to the description box. And for a limited time, Transparent Labs is giving away a free protein starter kit and 10% off your purchase when you subscribe. FYI, the kit includes a shaker bottle, a variety pack of 5 single-serving protein pouches in their top flavors, so you can find your favorite. Again, just click the link in the description or scan my QR code to get the offer while it lasts. There's no way around it. If the Dolphins lose to the Browns on Sunday, Mike McDaniel is gone. I am 100% convinced of it. Sorry, but when your starting quarterback starts calling out coaches and teammates, you know you've reached the point of no return. Now, perhaps McDaniel is viewed as an option for an offensive consultant role if and when he gets fired for the Eagles. Yet there's another name that's begun to get thrown out there in former Titans head coach Brian Callahan. After all, the Eagles don't want to make an outright change at offense coordinator, which Nick Sirianni has said they're not going to do, certainly not after the mini bye week, but it doesn't feel like, based on many beat reporters, they're going to do that. Then an offensive consultant bringing in someone from the outside, that part does make sense. With Anthony DeBona offering up multiple options, including the now dismissed Callahan, which I suppose isn't completely out of the question when you consider the connection Callahan has to the Eagles. For instance, the 41-year-old spent 3 seasons with current Eagles running back coach Jamal Singleton between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Raiders. Plus, during his time as offensive coordinator in Cincinnati, Callahan's units ranked 4th, 3rd, 1st, and 1st in terms of yards per game and total offense. I mean, yeah, he had Joe Burrow and the host of weapons to deal with, but that's kind of the same argument for where the Eagles are at right now. Although one small problem. Also, like Philly, Callahan never called plays in Cincinnati.
That's not a problem, is it? It is a problem.
Yeah, it probably is. Or it definitely isn't the case of bringing in someone like a Doug Peterson, a Mike McDaniel, or even a James Franklin, who Anthony mentions in his article. There's a link in the description if you want to check it out. But at least to get someone with some experience of play calling, you wouldn't have that with Brian Callahan, at least for successful play calling. Because once Callahan began calling plays in Tennessee, things have only gone backwards. So much so that he ended up forfeiting those duties after the 0-3 start this season.
I mean, if we keeping a buck right now, we ass.
Just saying, I understand the logic of it can't get much worse than Kevin Patullo, but Brian Callahan is not the best bet. Heck, the former Titans coach was 4-19 against the spread while at Tennessee, which in case you didn't know is the worst against the spread mark by a head coach in the Super Bowl era.
Challenge on the Islander play where they moved out of bounds on the sidelines, and it looked like his elbow hit inbounds first.
Yeah, you got to get a foot inbounds too, which we didn't have a clean look at whether his foot was down as well. An elbow doesn't equal 2 feet, so his foot would have had to come down as well. We didn't have a clean look, so the call from upstairs was that it wasn't more challenging.
I mean, you look back on it, the writing's on the wall, and it's no wonder he got canned. The dude couldn't win football games, couldn't score points, and had clearly lost the locker room.
I mean, it started at practice. I probably, just being honest, like this probably was one of our worst week of practice. Came out flat Thursday and things like that in that nature too. Sometimes things carry over, and when you get initially, you have to prove it every week and reprove it. You got to go out there and keep proving yourself, your team, that you can win this league. And we didn't do that on all 3 phases. And today was bad football. we didn't play good today at all. So
I don't know. Maybe in a consultant role, you don't have the head coaching duties, obviously. I still think if you're considering bringing someone in, seeing what we know or seeing what we've seen from the Eagles so far this season, I would at least like someone who has a track record of a decent, manageable outcome of calling plays. What do you think, though? Who's the top guy that they should bring in, or do they bring in anybody? Personally, just to add some motion and quicker play calling to the offense, I'm probably leaning Mike McDaniel. Honestly, getting anyone who will spread out the offense, run more RPOs, utilize the middle of the field would be more than enough. Of course, apparently KP plans on using more RPOs while also focusing on running the ball more. But yeah, I hear you. I get the PTSD of you hear that and immediately start praying that it doesn't translate into spamming inside zone runs a million times. Again, there's a reason the Eagles rank 29th when it comes to facing 3rd down and 5 or longer, at least in terms of getting to 3rd down and 5 or longer. They're not getting great plays on 1st and 2nd down. Not to mention that they're one of the worst at converting those downs and distances. After all, everything is predictable, but perhaps especially on the 3rd downs. Although it's funny because there's an argument as to what the biggest culprit of that is.
To say that the Eagles' offense is predictable might be an understatement. Like, this is 3rd and 10 against the Giants. All right, there's Goddard going out. All right, so they're in a 2-by-2 set, okay? Now, you're going to have Goddard and Smitty running stops at 5 yards. And then AJ, all right, and Dotson are going to go vertical. All right, there they are. Now, they throw it underneath to Goddard. He catches it for 5 yards. All right, 4th and 5. All right, here he goes. Here's a 3rd and 8. The exact same motion. Here comes Goddard going out to a 2-by-2 set. Goddard and AJ. All right, we got Dotson and we got Smitty. Here's the exact same combination right here on 3rd and 8. Stops, all right, mirrored routes, all right, stops and vertical down here, stops and vertical up there, and the pass rush gets to Jalen, they get sacked. Now here we go, 3rd and 3. Here we go, 2-by-2, all right, there we are. 2 stacks, here we go, mirrored routes, exact same stops right there, Giants just sitting on top of them in 2 verticals. Mirrored routes, same concept, same play. And this time Jalen just checks it down on the outside to Saquon, and he takes a 1-yard loss. To say it's predictable isn't even close to being accurate.
I mean, to me, the number one issue is the O-line. And, you know, I hear people who know better start with this predictable stuff. You know what happened in 2024? The Eagles' offense was really predictable in 2024.
Yeah.
But the O-line created a lot of big holes for Barkley.
Yep.
And he ran through some big holes in a very predictable run offense. There's not 1,000 running plays. So the things that make run offenses different, or in the minds of the people who think run offense is predictable, is how you get to basic runs. You know, maybe it's different personnel. Maybe it's different formations. Maybe it's the use of motion. Maybe it's different blockers at times. Let's say if you're running gap scheme, a different blocker as opposed to a guard being the puller, you know, the kick out blocker. But at the end of the day, there's not 1,000 different runs. It has to be blocked at the point of attack.
There is a point to be made when it comes to the O-line play, but like we all know, it's never just one thing. It's play calling and the blocking not being the same. Granted, shout out to Zack Berman, but you can see the numbers of yards per carry being over 6 when Philly runs outside to the right, outside to the left, or even right off the right tackle, and you wonder why the Eagles don't dial that up more. Full transparency, I get that the tush-push runs skew some numbers here, but last season the Birds were still a top 10 unit on runs up the middle. Whereas you see those averages, and they're without question a bottom 5 unit in the middle. The frustrating part is we've seen them do this. I mean, maybe not necessarily this year. We've seen a couple runs, but not really this year. Last year, though, we saw this unit do it. They ran up the middle, even in predictable formations and predictable inside zone, not to the extent the extreme. They could use some other elements to it. We've talked about that in the past, but they have instances we know they could do that. So I understand, the Eagles have the second hardest schedule remaining. That doesn't even play a factor. If this squad plays up to its potential, there's no concern. But like we all know, talk is cheap at this point. However, the players continue to argue that this season is not 2023, and the belief is still there.
What makes you confident the coaching is great?
Well, just being there in 23 and hearing the detail that's being coached, being at the practices, that the detail, even in the drills, when they coach the drills, the detail, that's the difference. Detail wasn't there in 23, and I'll happily say that.
Okay.
I'll be honest there. The detail was not there, the technique was not there in 23, and now it is. So I can't relate the two. And for me, that's where I draw it back to the executional players part. When we run a run play, We want to marry it up in the passing game too. So when that look, when we don't run that look well to set up the passing game, everyone's like, oh, well, now it looks like 23. Well, it's just we're not running the ball well.
Yeah.
And that's, at the end of the day, we need to establish the run game up front. And it starts with the O-line, and that's our main goal this week.
At the end of the day, 4-2 in a good spot right now. Just got to continue to get better. And I love, the conversation that we have. I love where the mindset that we're going to. But at the end of the day, we got to go out there and execute it. And, it's going to come down to tough, detail, and together. And that's the mindset that we're going to continue to have.
We're not letting a loss just humble us, and you can't let it humble. You got to keep going, and continue to find ways. This team is fine. This team is motivated, and try and get on the same page.
What do you see as the main issues with the offense?
Main issues? Self-inflicted wounds. Sometimes just lack of execution at the wrong time. If it's first down and you get lack of execution, it may not be the end of the world. But when it happens on third down, or puts us behind the sticks, that's hard to recover in this league. So I just think just being on the same page, and communication, and lack of execution.
We'll see. I'm by no means giving up on the squad right now, but there is a whole lot more questions than there are answers at this point for the Eagles. Like, here's one. What's Howie Roseman up to following some recent roster moves? FYI, in case you missed it, Philly released both running back Audric Estime and wide receiver Javon Baker from the practice squad. Although he did pretty quickly sign defensive end Titus Leo, who I'll talk about more in a second, and tight end Jaheim Bell to fill those spots. Of course, I understand the temptation to go wild for a CJ Gardner-Johnson reunion, especially after his agent shared he and the Ravens came to a, quote, amicable mutual decision.
Things worked out pretty good. They gave me a restraining order.
I'll help you out there. Baltimore did not want him. I'm sorry, but even CJ himself, when asked about signing with the Ravens practice squad previously, said he did it because he didn't have any other options. So yeah, no reason why you'd walk and leave elsewhere if teams didn't want you before, and they still don't want you now. Plus, then you have CJ tweeting out essentially an apology message to the league to say he's appreciative of all the opportunities he's gotten and is working to improve himself and looking forward to the next chance to play. For the record, nothing wrong with that, and I wish the guy well. Maybe he lands somewhere else, but it's not going to happen in Philly. Even though you do some quick checking based on recent likes from CJ and retweets of the Eagles' social media account, there's no doubt in my mind the 27-year-old wants to rejoin the Birds. But come on, we're going on 7 teams in the last 6 seasons. Stay in denial if you want, but there's a common denominator here. Having said that, I'm with you that the Eagles could use some edge and attitude back on defense, especially after what happened against New York. But I kind of think we're underestimating the impact Nakobe Dean can have. Not only on the field, but also getting into people's faces and making sure everyone's playing with that kind of swagger we saw last season. And despite only playing 6 special team snaps last week, Fangio sounds like he's going to figure out a way to get Nakobe back on the field this week.
Really what you want is your best combination. It's kind of like, when you're talking about the offensive line, if your 6th best offensive lineman is a guard, then your center goes down and he can't play center, or your tackle goes down and he can't play tackle. Do you go with I want my 5 best out there, or your best combination?
All right, I would like to see Fangio get the best 11 on the field, and regardless how you feel about it, Nakobe Dean automatically makes this run defense better. Heck, he probably helps in a lot of other areas too. Since the Eagles' defensive line this season ranks 25th in sacks, 22nd in hurries, 28th in percentage snaps with a pressure, 30th in tackles for loss, and 24th in yards per carry allowed. Again, like we all know, they need so much more help than that. And let's just say this, not an inconsequential rotation guy like Titus Leo. No offense, but the Birds did work out the former 2023 6th-round pick as they liked what they saw from him during joint practices over the summer against the Browns. However, the Eagles need a massive jolt to the line and primarily the pass rush. Which go figure, but the stars are aligning for the Dolphins pass rushers and Vic Fangio to have a little bit of a reunion. As now we're up to the 3rd or 4th verified report that Miami is actively shopping Jalen Phillips ahead of the deadline, with Ricky Scoop saying the team is ready to move on from him and open for business. By the way, I'm sure you're wondering who the heck is Ricky Scoops if you haven't heard of him, and is he reliable? But if you know anything, Ricky has broken stories and trades well before they happen, with some believing it's the account of a former NFL front office member, or well-connected media member, or someone with a whole lot of knowledge. Heck, he was the one who broke the Micah Parsons trade to Green Bay and other player movement way before even guys like Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport. Now, perhaps he ends up being wrong, although less than 1 hour of him sharing that scoop, his account was completely gone from X. Ultimately, who knows, but it's hard to deny that there's something fishy going on with the Dolphins and Ricky Scoops and why his account was banned. I don't know. Just keep an eye on it. Anyway, no official moves from Howie yet, but we'll continue to keep you posted once we hear anything. In the meantime, let's get into the injury updates from the latest practices for the Eagles and the Vikings. So for Philly, we got some good news seeing Quinyon Mitchell and Landon Dickerson getting in some good work at practice. Albeit technically, yes, it was just a limited fashion, but even the idea of maybe getting Q back is a big boost considering the matchup. And then Zack, Baun, Jalen, Carter, and Jordan Davis were full participants, with the only DNP being Grant Calcaterra. Although honestly, the biggest benefit was hearing that the Eagles made an organizational change moving forward to change walkthrough Wednesdays to practices with the pads on. Something that Nakobe Dean said has shifted the mindset for what the team is trying to get to going into this week.
He spoke on it and that was it. Like he didn't beat a dead horse, I would say. You know what I'm saying? Like definitely after we had Friday, Saturday, Sunday off, we ain't gonna come in Monday and talk about how bad we were on Thursday. So we watched the film individually, but not as a defense. We moved on to Minnesota, and we know we gotta pick up the nastiness, the violence, and the toughness of the group, and we gotta get our swagger back. And I feel like I don't feel like I know it's gonna happen.
Let's go. I know that it's just talk, but between that and the look Jalen Carter's got this week, the defense needs to show itself. Especially when you look at the Vikings injury report and you've got guard Donovan Jackson with a wrist injury. He got in a limited practice, but that's a starter who potentially may not go, as well as tackle Brian O'Neill dealing with a knee injury. Now, the good news is they got center Michael Juergens back with a full participant after a hamstring injury, as well as Carson Wentz with the shoulder injury, but he was a full participant. Plus, on the defensive side, they got Tyler Batty and Blake Cashman getting in full work, although they still only have Andrew Van Ginkel getting limited work with a neck injury. Reminder, I'll end up keeping you up to date on who ends up ready to go and who does not. But at the moment right now, the one big question mark is kind of who's going to be that quarterback. Is it Carson Wentz, who got the full participant, or J.J. McCarthy, who was a limited participant but is dealing with an ankle injury? I mean, personally, I doubt he starts this week, but Edge Jonathan Grenard might have accidentally said too much on a recent podcast.
We just, like, we still got to get everybody back. I think JJ, he'll probably be back this week or something like that, I think.
What do you think? Is it mind games? Is that actual legit info there on J.J. McCarthy? Is it Carson Wentz? Curious on what that looks like. It is a different matchup, even if it's Wentz. I'll get into that later in the week. I'll keep you guys posted all the way leading up to game time. We'll be streaming, of course, so just a reminder there. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, turn the notifications on. Don't miss out. I'll catch you on the next one. This has been the Philly Special.
Like I should feel like I should go.